Hi, welcome to the Weekly Outlook. This is Kim speaking on Monday the 15th of April 2019. So I'm going to look at the big picture here. What's going on from a fundamental aspect, what's the sentiment, and what's the key movers for this week. And then we'll look at trend. So what we would like is everything to be aligned. So for example, if the euro was running up in a nice some positive information coming through here from the base rate, if it was also giving us some nice sentiment, we've seen buyers coming in from assets and hedge funds, and the technicals were all nice and positive, we would be looking for longs, or more biased towards longs, or I would be at least. That said, none of that's true, so let's get on and see what's actually happening. We're going to start off with the US dollar. Current base rate's left at 2.5%, no increases in 2019, and it even looks like the one that's in 2020 may be knocked on the head, but we'll see. In fact, the actual forecasts that I'm looking at from the Fed Watch is looking like there will be actual reductions in the interest rate later this year. So and that's widely available, that information that is being priced into the markets. So how do we see the asset and hedge funds holding the money? Well, they're dropping the assets are still bullish on both. They're I say bullish, but got net positive positions. I've actually put the number of positions in here. It's not a major trade, the US dollar as such, in terms of the futures there, but positive, but dropping gradually there for the asset fund managers. The hedge fund managers got slightly more bullish. What we got coming out this week for some various speakers, we've got retail sales. That's the key one that's really there. Now, there was a couple of figures that came in a bit lower, that lower grade data last time, which could, because it was so bad last time, come out a bit more positive. So there may be some other factors that come in there, but in the main, it's looking okay. I don't know why I put the weekly trend on like as it is there, but we'll come back to that in a moment, the trend for the US dollar. Euro dollar, well, fundamentally 0%, and it could be getting worse. They're looking at all sorts of things in terms of what can improve the situation there at the moment, but the general feeling is negativity coming through there. As it happens, asset managers they're holding fairly sideways price action, or action in terms of the positions they're holding, as are the hedge funds. It's really quite flat in overall over the week. Now remember, I should just point out, these are done on these numbers come out Tuesdays, not monthly but weekly on a Tuesday, so they are lagging, but they give us a feel for what the bigger asset money and hedge fund money is doing, so you can sort of trade with the sentiment of those big traders. So at the moment they're relatively flat on both. Looking at the week ahead, we've got the German economic sentiment coming out, flash services and manufacturing later in the week on Thursday, I believe that is. So some data coming out there later in the week, which could create some volatility. Looking at some of those were negative last time, so there will certainly be a lot of focus on those figures. Looking technically, weekly we're still in this downward trend, and daily we're sort of in this cross patch at the moment. I'll come on to the charts for that in a little while, but being a bit bearish on the looking at particularly the fundamentals, to me is flawed. The banking system's flawed. I can carry on listing everything that's flawed, so anything decent in way of rallies, if we get the opportunity and see the signals and triggers, for me it's worth the short side. The pound interest rates left alone, of course, Brexit dependent. There's a sort of various beliefs of what might happen. It's come a hard exit or whatever else it's in material at the moment. What's the sentiment? Well, the sentiment actually, ironically, hedge funds are dumping or reducing their negative or their negative options effectively. They're selling, and the hedge funds are getting more bullish, so we could see a crossover at some point, more bullish crossover. What we've got in store for this week, we've got an employment report, pretty key, inflation and retail sales, and we've got Carney speaking, although it's not a significant speech. It's in Paris, it's on with a number of other speakers, but it could have enough in there to get some volatility into the pound. Technically, the pound's in a moderate uptrend there, but choppy otherwise. It's really sitting there on the weekly basis. When I say it's an upward trend, on a daily basis it's as choppy as anything. Dollar yen. Okay, no likelihood of any interest rates being done in any near-term future. It's got more and more negative. We're seeing from the big money asset managers, hedge money. They're getting more and more bearish on this. No major data out this week. Now, this is aligned effectively. I know we've got pointing arrows down this way, up this way, but remember this is just the yen as a whole. We trade it as the US dollar yen, so it would all effectively have arrows to the upside, stronger US dollar against the yen there effectively. What else is affecting this, of course, is the we saw it last week really, is where we saw money coming going back into risk assets, etc., and it's been coming out the yen there. So that's pushing the yen, US dollar yen up further as well, but we'll see whether that continues. Aussie dollar, they're still looking at potential next changes being reductions. We have got the monetary policy minutes out this week though, and that will give us much more of a clue there, and we've got employment data out this week, so key in that respect. Negative overall sentiment from the on the commitment of traders sentiment. Asset managers getting more negative, hedge funds getting slightly less negative, but all the same quite a negative view there. Looking at the trend-wise, big trend still down, choppy on the short term, and we could see some more positiveness sort of kicking through there, but it's choppy. Canadian dollar, we've seen a more dovish tone. It's again very difficult here. It may just continue in that way this week. We've got the inflation, retail sales, got a bit of data in about 3 minutes as I'm recording this, which might see the reaction to in a short while, but I don't expect a massive reaction to it. Asset managers are getting a bit more edging to a more neutral state, which generally when we see a crossover, if this figure goes negative next week, this is already negative, the net position is negative between these two lots, which is a bearish tone anyway. Technically, again, as with the US dollar yen, it's the US dollar CAD, so well, it's not necessarily the cleanest of price actions, but I would expect largely it's more erring on the bullish side for the US dollar CAD than bearish side overall. Dollar yen, New Zealand dollar even, whichever. Interest rates, still potential next change may be down. It's still looking bearish from that perspective. Interestingly, we've just turned net bearish from an asset fund manager's point of view, so it's completely bearish there on both views. It's net bearish anyway. Only data coming out this week is the CPI data, so not much to drive that. US dollar, New Zealand dollar, bearish. Okay, and finally the S&Ps. I've covered this off on here. I was saying finally, I haven't put gold on here, and I probably should have in a sense, but we'll look at gold separately. But the S&Ps, more and more bullish from the asset managers. The hedge funds have been hedging against these bullish moves most of the time. They've done it over the last year or so and been wrong, but they are hedge managers at the end of the day, and they could be using this to offset and actually properly hedge, I've said before. So the figure I'm really looking at is this figure here at 780, which is getting more bullish, and well, weekly and daily trend are to the bullish side. So let's have a look at how that fits technically quickly now, then running through these markets in the same order. Well, actually I'm going to actually start showing with if I can find the dollar index, it would be good. We can have a look at the dollar index here and just look at this from a if it switches to a weekly would be good. So weekly wise it's still actually I'm on the wrong one. Let's get this one. It's still in this sort of slightly upper trend there. It's not the clearest of movements, but it's certainly there. From a daily perspective, we've seen this risk back on, so risk money going back into riskier assets, etc. And so we've seen the dollar sold off a little bit. It's barely a move. What's clear, and you can, this is an inverted euro anyway, I would suggest, is what's clear from this is it's range bound in the bigger picture here on the dailies, and we could just well, it could easily just switch back, so easy. From where it is at the moment. Euro dollar, in other words the dollar index inverted. From a weekly point of view, if it switches over, it would be very nice. It's not wanting to switch over at the moment, it's just taking its time. So euro dollar, looking, it's still in this downward trend on the weeklies. I mean, last week it's put this bullish pivot swing in actually, which well, we could see some follow through, and I'm not completely against watching any follow through on this. I'd like to see it rally a little bit more to sell into it. It's got scope to push up on this if we're in the range. If we put the trend line across the highs here, people may be trading for that. They may be trading for the 200 to 50. It's interesting, I was looking at some traders today, and all of a sudden it gets a little bit of a rally going and they get short all of a sudden, and there's quite a high percentage of shorts on some brokers' systems there, but it's a bit neutralish in real terms, where it's sitting in a minute between the high and the low there, quite neutral. Would like, as I say, would like to have seen it push up a bit further. There is a bit of cloud formation for those that follow the Ichimoku clouds that's holding it back at the moment and probably creating resistance. So it could roll over from here. Where if you wanted a very simple short sort of idea, it may be literally well, just short it on the break of these lows here and run it back down maybe. But I'd rather be selling from a higher perspective or a higher point. But I certainly want to be shorting it at some point. Pound dollar, choppy as anything on this weekly, but it's still erring on the weekly upside there. But the dailies, it's a tight knit little movement. At some point it's going to go. It does to me in this picture look like it could go to the downside with the lower highs that came through there and the lower lows. It's not really doing too much at all. We spent most of this week, last week, in a tight zone, which makes it quite difficult unless you're trading it in a very short term, just trading it between those ranges. But it could just as easy rally, then it could roll over. Yen, as I've already covered, fundamentally there's weakness sitting here, so we expect more upside against US dollar strengthening. We're bang into that weekly 200 at the close of last week, which may have just stalled it a little bit maybe as traders sell into that sort of thing. But it has got potential to push on. Some people are questioning whether it's going to make it back up to that 114 area. Well, quite possibly. Fundamentally, if the risk becomes off a little bit, or back on, should I say rather, we could see this selling further ahead. So that's the dollar yen. Aussie dollar. Aussie dollar really in a downward trend. It's almost trying to walk its way sideways out for some sort of trend, but it's not fooling us. Although last week again it put a little bullish pivot swing in there, so maybe it's got a little bit more upside. It's really struggling to hold on. I mean, on Wednesday it pushed up, Thursday it came up, Friday it pushed up, today it's done nothing, and we're in Easter week. Generally it's a 4-day week for most traders. The US markets are open on the Friday, but it'll be thin, I would imagine, which may be thin enough to create some volatility for it to run off there. But for most traders, it's a short, and most countries, it's a shorter working week. I say many countries, it's a shorter working week with holidays, bank holidays on Friday. So where to with this? Is the answer. There you go. Really non-committal, because how can I? It's going sideways and not really giving me too much of a clue. Fundamentally, I'm bearish on it. I find it hard to be bullish any other way, really. some deal with China and America. May see me change my mind a little bit more on that. Okay, Canadian dollar is still in this upward trend overall. It's not managed to do half as much as I expected some time ago. I was getting all sort of, oh, this looks like it could be bear flag, and it's could continue to its way down. That was some time ago. It was in January. At the moment, it's just chopping along merrily. If anything, it's looking to me that it could have further upside. We've had the news out this afternoon. It's hardly really giving it much of a kick. Let's just go down to a 5 minutes whilst we're a bit of a kick. It's more of a kick than that 5 minutes, and it's done all day. Barely a move on any other the big time frames there, but it has had a little bit of a movement, which might just roll back on that. We'll see, but the figure's obviously weak on that figure. Weak numbers coming out, beg your pardon. Overall, it does look, I think we're looking at what we're seeing there then. Well, just may see a continuation to the upside, but again, not a clear chart. And this whole emphasis on not clear charts, it goes across a lot of the markets. What is clear? Well, I was looking at gold. I said I'd talk about gold. Gold, it generally sells off at this time of year. It's just a general for the actual domestic markets, and the markets that buy gold are just they're not there at this point, and we often see a sell-off, and we're seeing a bit of a sell-off at the moment. Where to? Let's look at the weekly sort of rolling over, maybe back towards the 200, maybe 50, but you can see that the weekly 50 still facing south. If it came down to that, maybe it'll just slide through it a little bit more. I'm sort of looking at that quite bearish. I was looking for a bit more of a retrace, maybe back to the weekly pivot to sell into, but at the moment lower highs, not fully conclusive lower lows, but almost there, certainly initially. So bearish on that. And finally we'll look at the S&Ps, we'll look at the rolling futures there, and well, what we're seeing, well, weekly bullish, and it looks like that 29.46 area could be in range in a week or so's time. He said this 3 weeks ago. I don't really want to be selling it. I can see some weakness on this daily point of view here, some divergence. I'm sure it's probably showing off across. Actually, the MACD is actually picking up from its last highs there, so or maybe not. But it doesn't look this with the markets the way they are. One thing we've got to bear in mind is I know I should have mentioned it earlier on, is we are into earnings season, so earnings weeks. So we'll have earnings coming out that could throw the fly in the ointment for this, but we'll have to wait and see. Early indications weren't too bearish, but we could see some knock-on effects from certain trading deals, but for now it's looking bullish technically. That is it. I hope you have a great week. I'll speak to you next week. Bye for now.